Welcome to our session, Condition BIM Data Powers Connected Construction. Today we're going to have a live panel with a bunch of wonderful panelists just around data. So just want to quickly have everybody review the safe harbor statement. I'd be blown away if you've made it this far through AU without seeing one of these, but definitely just keep an eye on this. Basically, we could discuss things today that are future facing, and want to make sure that you know that plans can change. So take a second to review this, and if you have any questions, let us know. So about me, my name is Nate Coombs. I am a senior business consultant here at Autodesk. This is my third AU, and it's great to be back. I look forward to the next one of these that everybody can be in person. But yeah, I work with our largest construction customers in working in depth, whether it be implementing technology or helping them figure out kind of their direction when it comes to the technologies they use and how they build. So a huge proponent of sustainability, huge proponent of BIM. If anyone's ever heard of the product Assemble, that product's my baby, and I came through Autodesk from the acquisition of that product. So I am based in Boston, and if I'm not working, I'm probably out taking pictures of something somewhere. So looking forward to introducing the rest of the crew here. So before we get into that, kind of just a view into what we'll be discussing today. I really want this to be open and free flowing to my panelists. Feel free to disagree, feel free to chime in. I want to make sure that this is open-ended. We get a bunch of different perspectives here, but I really want to look at just how BIM models are used throughout the process, kind of a look into the past, a look into the future, and a look at how a bunch of different organizations use information to be successful. I think we have a pretty diverse audience here, a diverse panel here of different GCs, different scope and scale, and even geographic location. So I'm really interested to hear the different perspectives and how everybody is kind of being successful in their own way. A couple of things that I really want to make sure is touched on is a misconception that BIM is only for big GCs. I've seen plenty of startup companies lately that are small, agile, and using BIM to be very successful. And I also want to make sure everybody understands that models are becoming more and more relevant and more trustworthy every single day. And if you aren't using them, then you're already behind the curve. So I definitely want to make sure everybody knows that it's like an open discussion here, and we do have a chat box and a question and answer that we'll get to at the end of this discussion. And if everyone who's chimed in here would love to put it into the chat where you're from, I'd love to kind of see where our audience is based. But let's meet our panelists. So first, I will toss it over to Tomislav. You're on mute, Tomislav.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you, Nate. Tomislav Žigo, CTO with Clayco. Whatever is written here, you can take it lightly. Basically, I've been with Clayco 15 years, overseeing deployment of our technology across the wide spectrum of activities. We're an integrating practice, so working closely with architects, engineers, guys in the field, and the owners is something that I enjoy doing, and that really drives me to get up every day and walk through this door. And looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Leon, VDC with Clayco. So I started with Clayco with the BIM estimating, BIM takeoffs, working a lot with our pre-con department, and then transferred more into the VDC daily services. But right now, more on the data track, working with different software vendors, looking into the data analytics. So, a lot of data integrations, looking into the business insights for different projects. Looking forward to this discussion. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matt Roberts with Gray Construction. I'm a data manager in our VDC department. I've been with Gray about 3 years here in Lexington, Kentucky. I started out on the project management, ended up helping develop a workflow where we leverage our BIM models through Assemble and Microsoft Power BI in order to track work in place and productivity. And we've done a lot of really cool things with BIM in the past couple of years. So that's really what we're doing.
Great to have you.
Thanks.
Next to a good friend of mine from DPR, Jordan Trice.
Thank you, Nate. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Trice. I am on the CS corporate service, pre-con group at DPR. We serve and support about 350 estimators across the country. And I've been an estimator probably 16 years, since 2008. I started, like Matt did, as a project manager on healthcare. And my job is to build integrated workflows, integrate with VDC, with data and development, with our planning and scheduling team, and with operations. So had a lot of value come out of the use of Assemble, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all about it.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Badri.
Hi, everyone. This is Badri. I work as a VDC engineer at Construct and have my primary focus on developing workflows and delivering model-based quantification projects. I have 5 years of experience in construction industry, bulk of which is for projects in pre-construction phase. I leverage model data to ensure model quality and make sure that they are trustworthy. And for this, we use Assemble and other model authoring tools such as Revit to automate some of the model checks. I'm currently located in Pune, India.
Awesome. Well, I am extremely excited to have everybody here know about you guys, but I think it's probably a little different for those who are back in office, but I don't get enough opportunities to dress up and to look a little bit nicer. So it's great to be having this discussion. So let's get into the chat here. So I want to start by taking a look into the past. Obviously, we have many years. I bet we got an easy century of experience here on this call. And I'd love to kind of hear what things look like for the young generations like myself. So please, if anyone wants to kind of kick us off here, I would love to hear what role BIM used to play on projects 5 or even 10 years ago. And don't everybody speak at once. Tomislav, go ahead.
Let me take a crack, because I guess you implied that I'm a century old. So. Well, listen, it changed quite a bit. What projects used to be when it comes to BIM, it was all about models when it started. And I don't want to say, I'm not saying that was the right approach, but that was a kind of easy way into organizations that were thinking about technology. Let's visualize. Luckily, I would say all of us on this panel agree that we had a little bit more sinister agenda of interjecting data into that workflow and really trying to see how models can facilitate that data exchange, and then away from models. I mean, what started as a focal point now, in my view, it's only being regarded as an index that points to right data and delivers the right data to the right person at the right time. So I think that's a natural progress of things, and I'm looking forward to another 10 years of this progression, see where it takes us.
For sure. I think you made a really interesting delineation that I think is important, that like there's a big difference between a 3D model and BIM. BIM is data rich, BIM is useful. 3D model, you might be right, it might be garbage in, garbage out. But like people need to make sure that there is a fine line there between the two things. And I mean, I completely agree that this last 10 years, maybe 5 years for more so for me. I mean, I remember joining Assemble and I used to get kicked out the door. Every single estimator I talked to laughed me off of Zoom, because it was like, we can't use models for this stuff. And it took a lot more work back then than it does now. Now I go talk to an estimator and they're still skeptical, don't get me wrong, but at least they're much more open to thinking about it. It's much more of the norm. And that's just in the last 5 years. So I do agree. It's very exciting to see where things are going to head in the coming decade. Does anybody else have a quick thought or two on that before we move to the next question?
I just like to say that I think we're also really focused now on model conditioning, which may not have been a focal point in the past, just getting those quantities and, still having these silos of departments. And, as a general contractor in several companies, now it's much more about integration, and it's much more about structured model conditioning. And I think Assemble's really helped us with that from the data tree standpoint, just to be able to say, we may not want to stuff a model, but we're going to at least be able to put the right amount of information in as we do our normal workflow. So it's come a long way.
For sure. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the little visualization. Like, there's a big difference between like it's data. It's just raw data, organized data, and then visually presented data. There's a very big difference in how data is perceived based on just how it's viewed or how you look at it. So wonderful. So how about what did a typical BIM project look like 10 years ago or 10 years ago compared to today? And Matt or Leon or somebody who hasn't talked yet, if they want to.
I mean, I would say, the primary function would be using the model for, collaboration, coordination in the field, using Navisworks really heavily to do clash detection and getting a usable model out for our site team. But 5 years ago, that was pretty much the extent of what we would be using it for. So
for sure. Leon or Badri, what about you?
Yeah, actually I started with Clayco about 6 years ago. When I started, the model, I feel like the model is mainly used for like viewing parts. There is not a lot of like data exchange from the data perspective. It's really like a tool to assist the 2D when I started, but it's mainly for like 3D coordinations. I still remember trying to extract quantities from Revit. It's but not at a like large scale, not systematically. So I still like it. It's kind of from a perspective, like it's really like for helping the 2D, verifying the quantities for 2D from that perspective, more like assisting tool.
For sure.
Thanks.
I'm glad Leon brought that point. If you really think about models from several years ago, when BIM was going through its process of defining itself, there was a lot of rumor everything needs to go into the model, and there were many mistakes that were done back then. People were modeling books on bookshelves. People were placing data that has no merit being in a model, and then we end up having this kind of inflated, very heavy, unmanageable models. I think we progressed significantly over 10 years in trying to delineate which data goes into which bucket, how is data being connected, how do we collaborate in the cloud. And cloud made a huge impact on the way we work and how we, to Jordan's point, condition the data in the model, how do we connect, how do we extract. So 10 years ago, we were talking about a simplistic approach to BIM. Now I think we are getting to the point where one can say maybe we are drawing some parallels with the manufacturing industry, hopefully.
Hey, you're going to perk some people at Autodesk ears up with those sorts of talks, Tomislav. But I also think everybody's forgetting that I imagine 5 or 10 years ago, the BIM and VDC project probably took a good few hours of convincing the architect to give you the model in the first place. And that's probably something that I've seen quite a bit more of this in recent times, is just the willingness to share, even if it still is with a liability of using it. So, all right, I want to look now at what's the current state of reality. I mentioned, and everybody's kind of talked about here, like we've seen that shift from 5 or 10 years ago to today. And do we have a ways to go? Absolutely. But it's always good to see change. I'd love to kind of hear the group's view on why we think that change kind of happened. What was it? Do people kind of just figure out, oh, you know what, we got to do it, otherwise we're going to fall behind from a business perspective, or is it gains in productivity? Is it? I'd love to just kind of hear the opinions, because it's definitely probably a wide array of things.
I think we've seen our trade partners especially really change their attitude and the way that they view BIM as more than just something that supplements, document creation, and they're actually seeing the value in it now. So, I mean, that's for us a big change, just our trade partners, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the current state in is that the project teams see the use of models to improve construction quality that reduces risk and project cost. So this and as accessibility to models has also improved through integrated platforms like BIM 360 and Assemble, models are becoming more and more as a single source of truth for the project teams. The major point what we here at Construct use is we build what we model is kind of becoming real now.
Absolutely. I also think that you made a really good point there. That's like models are more accessible now than ever, like to everybody. It's much more democratized through tools like BIM 360, Assemble, cloud-based systems. It's all things that we've alluded to so far that like I think everybody has much more ability to go use a model. It's not like you need the VDC computer from 2005 that's like 10 inches thick. But awesome. I think this is great. So Samira threw this statistic into our deck as we were planning all this. In a recent survey, 29% of companies reported they wouldn't bid on a project involving BIM. I think if I had to guess, that the skew of that would be the smaller the organization, the more likely they are to have answered that way. It's definitely not 1-to-1, but if I had to bet money on it, that's probably where I would go. I'd love to kind of I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that just briefly before we get into the next question, because I thought that was a pretty interesting statistic. That was a lot larger number than I thought it would be.
Yeah, are those companies from Missouri in terms of?
Oh, come on!
show me state. Well, I know
Chicago guy talking.
But here's an interesting one, and this is kind of challenge for all of us. I face this every day because I need to go and justify to stakeholders on the job why does it matter to use BIM from a GC perspective. I completely agree with Matt. Subcontractors, trades really took it to the level where they are fabricating. For them, it makes perfect sense, and I'm not saying that it doesn't for us, but for us, it's more about the data management. And then how do we justify expenditure for technology in overall idea of a project cost? It's still a challenge. Metrics are something that we as teams need to work really hard on in order to present them in some kind of tangible fashion and say, yes, invest in VDC team because this is where we are gaining benefits. And I think that's the focus that GC needs to have. And again, speaking from that perspective, so those that are refusing to bid, I think they're still trying to define where the benefits are. I would welcome a healthy discussion. How do we provide internal KPIs? How do we track BIM cost on a job? And how do we prove this to be a real value beyond expediency in making decisions and resolving issues in such a way that our schedules end up being maintained? So it's still up to define that value more robustly, if you will.
That is such an interesting. I always think of it as like a capability. Like if they don't want to bid on this because they don't have the ability to or the knowledge base to work on a project like that. But you're probably right. It's very much probably a question a lot of times of, do we want to spend the money on BIM services, especially if their small organization doesn't have an internal VDC team. It becomes an extra expense. So that is something to consider. And I think that what you mentioned is very intuitive of measuring when is it valuable? Because I guarantee you there's definitely situations today where if you did the cost benefit analysis, you might be worth it to not build it in conventional manners. And I definitely want to see a time in my life where that's not the case. But I definitely think that it's having KPIs for why is it useful, when is it applicable, can make it really much easier to justify. So
I think it's a good point, and you can measure anything, right? But it's hard to put a value on something that doesn't happen because you built the practice version, right? So
right.
I think productivity gains is probably and differentiation was how it started. And then now, since everybody's kind of adopted this, BIM, centric. I don't say everybody, but a lot of people have moved forward with BIM in significant way. Like DPR will do BIM on every project. And it's just the way that we are going to mitigate risk, and provide value. So I'm surprised to hear that the statistic was as high as you stated.
I agree I completely agree. And I kind of think we're starting to get into this, but the next question is kind of about that. Like, how do you think we equip a smaller, maybe less tech savvy organization to not only see the benefits of BIM, but to be able to keep up with the industry that is constantly moving towards technology?
I mean, I think a program like Assemble is a perfect way to get, a smaller company into BIM and get them used to using it, because it's not like you need some really beefy computer to use. I mean, it's a web browser based software. You can do so much with the model as far as adding good data to it, conditioning it. I think it's a great way to introduce BIM to a small company for sure.
I agree. I think a lot of it has to do too with it's funny. All roads lead back to cost. What's new? But it's turning away from the fact that you need to have VDC members. You need to have people go through 20 hours, 20, 30 hours of Revit training. You need to have heavy duty computers in a BIM lab. Like, none of that is true. It's all those things great and useful? Absolutely. But are they required to start working with these models and start kind of implementing them to your workflows? Even if it's not, like I said, I led with Assemble being my baby, and I'll always stand by that. But even if it's even simpler method of using a free BIM viewer or something like that, like emphasis on the free there, just get into it and start looking at it, and don't let like a preconceived notion of what something is stop you from experimenting and kind of looking towards ways to improve the process.
And Nate, here's a food for thought. Let's just stop calling it BIM to begin with.
Right.
That would make it probably more appealing, because here's the real fact. I mean, it's not one measure fits all. If you're a smaller GC, maybe you're just interested in some aspects of, let's say, monitoring quality on your job site that doesn't necessarily have to be model driven, but it can feed in somebody else's model. So, last 2 years, probably and I'm not trying to brag about it, but I was very little in any models. I'm more looking in concepts of big data and machine learning, and how do we implement those concepts in an overall idea of a digital project delivery. So let's take this BIM, let's take the model out of the table. I mean, Autodesk is also moving away from calling BIM 360. It's Autodesk built now, or what's going to be next year, I'm not sure. But the point being is, then we can really dose it and really appropriately say, hey, you're a small subcontractor. This is how you can use data from Assemble without necessarily saying you need to use BIM, because when they hear that, they freak out. They mean workstations, they mean VDC people, they mean ton of software, where indeed, a single spreadsheet that is pulled out of the central data source might just do the job.
Yeah. If not BIM, what do you call it?
I'll leave that to Autodesk.
And that's the food for thought right there. So I know we have a pretty diverse audience, and panel here. And I want to make sure that we're inclusive of not just the American way of doing things. So I spent a lot of time pre-COVID working throughout Europe, just kind of, we'll call it evangelizing Assemble, working with different organizations. And I quickly realized that Europe was a few years ahead of the United States when it comes to their use of BIM. And I actually learned that in a few cases, there was actually contractual obligations. And I mean, we all hear about the just different BIM mandates in different parts of the world. I'd love to hear thoughts across the panel here. And maybe Badri, obviously you're our correspondent from India. I'd love, maybe you'll lead us off. But where do we think why do we think there's that kind of difference from region to region, country to country? And then once you kind of give that view, I'd love to hear one of the US guys here talk about why do you think the US might be lagging behind a little bit?
Not just US, but many countries lagging there. So one of the main reasons could be, governance in Europe mandating BIM protocols and government funding even to use the new tech of construction in infrastructure projects. So that is something that has probably hugely, advanced the use of VDC or BIM in European countries. And this is what I believe US will get there eventually when owners, project stakeholders will see the value in the digital twin of the building, not just for the construction or the pre-con phase, but also for the facility management requirement in the future.
Absolutely.
Those are my 2 cents.
I definitely agree with you. And I think that I even heard it I did a few presentations last AU about sustainability. And I interviewed a few folks at different companies, and somebody from Skanska we were talking about just like lead projects in sustainable building. And they said that they were at the mercy of the owner a lot of times. They always have their sustainable bottom line, like their sustainable practices. But if the owner doesn't want to go that direction, they're at the mercy of that direction. And you'd see it now with like Biden including language around using construction technology and infrastructure package. Like I think that I agree completely that is the most direct way forward, at least. But yeah, where do Tomislav, I saw you just come off of mute.
Yeah, as much as I like to complain from time to time, I would say not everything overseas is that hunky-dory. I mean, Europe is a big place, and there are countries that are doing better than some others.
Yeah, for sure.
Scandinavia, you look at Britain, Germany is kind of halfway, and then as you're moving further southeast throughout Europe,
don't forget the Netherlands.
Yeah, well,
dialed in.
Phil, but we won't forget them. They're doing great actually there. But it's different. But I think the one thing that is quite different in Europe is that the software diversity there is far greater than here. You have multiple platforms. You have Autodesk, you have Nemetschek, you have TechCloud, whomever is there. And I think when you have multiple players playing in the same box, they're inevitably drawn toward making some kind of consensus-driven decisions. So maybe they say, all right, we don't care what you use, but let's agree on a common standard. Where here we have a little bit less of a variety, and the common standard becomes what you use with a larger software supplier. I don't know who that might be, but that kind of policy-driven approach, I think is going to be quite some time till we see that here.
I agree. I very much agree with your point too. I would like to add that like competition also drives growth. So that's definitely, I think, a contributing factor. You're very much correct in like that. There's way more players. In my time in Europe, I can't tell you how many times I felt stupid not knowing like about this company or that software and that everybody was using. So, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I've seen, we've done a little bit of work in Europe recently, and, I've seen some of the BIM models that are produced for jobs like that. And they're incredibly in-depth fabrication level for every discipline. And again, I don't know how it really works in Europe. I could be wrong, but I'm not certain that we could really get to that point for fast track design build projects here in the US, unless there's just some, I guess, awakening in customers realizing the value of BIM. And, I guess just on a tight time frame, it's tough enough getting the type of BIM models that we have out in the field, keeping up with the drawings and everything. So I do see it as a challenge. I'm not saying that, I think it would be something that's unattainable, but, I definitely think, there's going to have to be a case made for, owners and stakeholders, like Badri was saying, that, they're going to have to really learn the value of BIM for that to change here.
Yeah, and you just said design build too. I think that is a very key point that I don't think it's possible. I very much agree with you. And if any way is going to make it possible, design build, design assist, those sorts of projects are the future. I mean, they're already the documented benefits of being closer in relation with the architect when you're you're in the early phases of a project. And I definitely think that without that kind of like interaction and interoperability with one another, it's just, there's too much of a disconnect to ever make up the ground that you lose. So, alrighty. Any final thoughts before we shift gears a little bit? All right. So to everybody's favorite subject, I'd love to hear what led to some of the teams on the call here using Assemble. Everybody on this discussion is like, if I looked at the list of usage, all of you guys would be at the top. If I looked at the list of workflows and users, all would be at the top. So I'd love to hear kind of your experience with Assemble, but also the beginnings of like what was the initial reason, like this is something that we got to start working with. And Jordan, you're the first one I met here, so I'm gonna let you go first. Badri, you'll get the next. You'll get number 2.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think it just became obvious that we need to leverage the data that was coming directly out of the design, and it just, you know, it spreads like wildfire once you actually show people the value. But not only just for pulling quick quantities and reviewing 2D quantities, but also that conditioning piece that I just can't let go of. I feel like we find more and more use cases for Assemble every day, it feels like, and we're, you know, now we're conditioning the models to our estimating line item level and pulling those directly into the estimating platform. And like, now we can say, oh, well, let's visualize, you know, the 2D versus 3D effort on this project. And let's, you know, maybe push some data from the estimate line items in the estimating platform back into Assemble, and we can start to try to capture, you know, more conditioning, more automatic ties potentially to schedule activities. And I mean, the list goes on and on. So I feel like it was curiosity at first, and then potentially differentiation, and then just these use cases just build up like crazy. So the data flows are what we're working with now. And I just would beg you for a public API.
For sure. Hey,
Yeah.
I know everybody else would. Fun
Right.
fact, Jordan Trice was my very, very first in-person customer meeting of my career, actually, with a good pal that we all know, John Pryor. Shout out to John. So Badri, I know you got some thoughts on this too.
Yeah. So we implemented Assemble widely across DPR and also in Construct, as it democratizes model data for everyone. It is easy to open, share, and use the models on Assemble. And as Jordan already mentioned, it is used. It's a great conditioning tool. So we can condition models in other platforms as well, but Assemble is just great at it. It's easy and can be used with anyone. So one main thing how we use it is a key to visualization for those who do not have model authoring expertise. So that's the reason that actually pulls people towards Assemble.
For sure. Anyone else?
Yeah, sure.
We kind of started using Assemble in a sense just for takeoff purposes, and we kind of stumbled across some of the other things it could do by accident. There's so much value to be had in the ability to tie your schedule to the modeled objects, to be able to, using Revit, break out these objects that may be modeled in huge pieces like your slabs and actually divide them into completely accurate slab pours so that your guys out in the field are tracking it as accurately as possible. And not only that, but the value that the site managers are getting from being able to visualize all of this with their subcontractors and their daily coordination meetings, with the customer, if they want to see this data. It's just because of the high level of customization and all of the data that you can add to it and get out of it. I mean, it's just such a perfect tool. We really took it and ran with it. So
absolutely. I know you did. Leon.
Yeah. So just to answer your question, what led your team to implement Assemble? First of all, we have like very strong technology advocate leaders like Thomas Love in our firm. We try all different kind of software all the time. Thomas Love really backs up like in R&D in different software. So that's the first thing, like, it's like a top-down management, like we're really interested in trying out different technologies, investing R&D.
True.
And the second thing that I was using the Assemble's ancestor software at the very beginning. So the reality that Assemble really saves like literally half of the time because it's really user-friendly. It's very intuitive, even for someone without like a BIM background or without like, our architecture or engineering background. It's just very intuitive. And the third thing that, we have been using Dynamo a lot to implement like for some workflows. And Assemble is actually, I would say, it's a simplified version, like from some perspective for Dynamo, you don't have to deal with the code, but it really does the job what the Dynamo does. And the fourth thing that at that time, at the very beginning, because Matt was also mentioning like asset tracking, I was on the project using to track the installation of the different rooms from the project. We were using Assemble's like brothers, like BIM 360 Field. There are some, some tricks that it's not functioning very well when you're tracking the rooms, because rooms are basically like transparent box. We contacted the developers of BIM 360 Field app. There's really no way at that time to fix that bug unless they have to go through their developers for a long time to fix it. So we have been using like a 3D tag by incorporating still like the Dynamo script to track the installation status of the rooms. But however, the iPad of Assemble does not have that problem at all. Like the developer of the Assemble iPad, they did think about like tracking different kinds of categories, including rooms, transparent objects. It really positions you to a good location, even in standing in the center of the room. So, for those reasons, like we really have great confidence for Assemble at the very beginning, because we know like they understand what the customers need compared to their peers or ancestors. So just to answer your question, why we have so much confidence at the beginning, and that's why we decided to keep investing on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another shout out to Chad Ames, the Assemble mobile developer.
Just a really short observation. It was a natural progression. And when we noticed that people that had a vision of the cloud from a really good product that we like, which I won't mention, went to Assemble, and thanks to John's persistence, it was a logical choice. And to be honest, at that time, when we started Assemble, it was an honest product with a very nimble team and with great ideas and great client engagements. And I think that's a recipe for success. So good technology, good people, good client relationship. It worked out.
Plus one.
That's a compliment.
Yeah. Definitely the best customer success I've ever seen. I mean, hands down.
It's not going to coo crazy here, Jordan.
All right, now.
All right. I think this next one's going to be a really good topic of discussion here, especially because I look at the different users of Assemble on this call, and I think every one of you uses it in a pretty different way, all a little bit outside of the box. Like when it was actually pretty cool. It's like I mean, starting with Assemble back in 2016. I kind of watched the product itself kind of change and focus, change in workflow. I remember learning it as a quantification tool, and that was really the main idea. And as years went on, as kind of BIM data, as more people got involved, it really evolved into data management, into tracking progress, into integration with schedule, into all these different really unique facets, and all in a way that you haven't seen in other tools. I've yet, in all of my time traveling, talking to different customers, ever found a tool even remotely similar to the way that we manipulate and work with data. So I'd love to hear kind of some of the innovative ways. Obviously, you guys are all using Assemble in a very basic fashion as a foundation, but I'd love to hear kind of the more cutting edge front of the the stuff that you get awards for, that you guys are using Assemble. And Matt, I knew you got an award for your use of Assemble last year. So if you want to lead us off here, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So like I mentioned, we're able to track pretty much all of the disciplines, that are being modeled, adding lots of data, breaking things up into the realistic trackable parts. We curate specific views for each discipline. We bank in the statuses so that the guys out in the field aren't trying to enter in, what a status would be. It's already there in a list form. We're using the Assemble schedule integrator to tie the P6 schedule to the objects. And then we're pulling all that data out into Microsoft Power BI. We're building reports that are really detailed, and it's, we're not just using the Assemble data, we're using, safety data, man hours, tying all this data from several different sources together in one productivity report for each project team. And, we'll have a page showing all of the different like structural steel activities, showing you how much you're averaging per day versus what you need to do per day in order to meet your scheduled duration. It'll change colors if you're, behind, whatever. It's just a really good way to provide a weather vane for the project status for these site teams, project teams. And it's, something we spent a little bit of time developing, but it seems to have been received really well by our teams. So
for sure. Jordan, I know DPR is doing a lot of that tracking workflow as well. I know you're a little bit more focused on the cost modeling side, and you've done a lot of work on that. So I'd love to hear kind of the advanced workflows that you've been kind of working through.
Sure. Yeah. I've been working with Badri a lot over the past year. It's been really good. Our focus, we do have the production tracking that we've been leveraging. I know we have other platforms that people like as well, but Assemble's definitely been one. And we have leveraged that conditioning effort with the data trees to be able to sort down to our line item level for WinEst, which has been really helpful. Like I said earlier, probably should have waited, but just to be able to just a bulk import into our estimating platform. So we're mapping across that way. And I know we're taking some of our model data now into the construction data lake and trying to, improve the throughput there. And Assemble's been very helpful from that standpoint. There are a lot of projects. We've done some TAC planning. I know Badri would be really good for you to chime in. And Badri actually goes and does all of the model quality checks and leverages Assemble for every project and sets up views for estimators. So we're really just trying to hand models to pre-construction on a platter, basically, and say, here's your views. And Badri, I would like to hear you.
Yeah, sure, Jordan. So, apart from what Jordan mentioned regarding model quality checks and using data trees to take the line item level data directly to WinEst and get it back into Assemble, obviously that is one part, but there is also another part which was already present in Assemble, which is creating those templates inside an Assemble project and being imported into a lot of projects. So over the last year with Jordan, we have created templates across multiple hubs in the company, and organization-wide, almost like, I think there has been a lot of adoption of that template, and more than 50 plus projects have already been using that template, to be honest. So that is something I feel is one of the best ways Assemble has been used in our company, is a standardized using methodology throughout all the projects.
Absolutely. One other thing I didn't mention was the ability to view rooms and leverage those data trees allows you to sort of pull together a lot of project history. So the rooms need to be aggregated in departments in a consistent way. And that's been a really nice feature of Assemble for us as well, for project history.
So looking at the clock here, we got about 15 minutes left, and I want to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A. And I still want to get a little bit of opinion on looking to the future, but Tomislav, I have one question for you before we move on. I want to hear a little bit really briefly on just like how Assemble has, like not even the use of Assemble, but the concept of Assemble has accelerated the your organization, Clayco's digital strategy.
Wow.
And I asked you that to say briefly, which is a challenge. But.
No, that's a great question. I don't know if accelerated is the right word. Like work that Liang and Kritika and a few other people on the team are doing, it's an eye opener that really uses Assemble as a testing ground or test bed to identify data pathways across the organization. Meaning, for example, one of the first questions that came to our mind was when Assemble was purchased by Autodesk is, let's talk about the visualization engine, graphic engine.
Yeah.
You know, Forge versus Hoops. Pros and cons. Second one is, all right, now we have this great visual tool. We have asset module. You know, immediately Liang and I and a few other people started to say, how do we tie those things together? And then what do we do more? Like you heard, everybody on this call is utilizing Power BI or any other reporting engine, doesn't really matter, to look in Assemble. But I think Assemble, with its bidirectional capability of pulling data out and pulling data in, is an eye-opener for the rest of the industry to think right in a way how we enabling our processes, and when does data become an actionable insight and information that we can act upon. So it's not that Assemble is helping us define our strategy, but Assemble is a perfect testing ground. Or products like Assemble, you know, I don't know what Assemble is going to be called a year from now. Autodesk estimate build, and I don't know. But point is, that kind of philosophy when it comes to developing a product is helping us to foresee our future in a more certain way. For sure. I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, hey, it's it'll definitely do. All right, here. So we got two quick things before we wrap this up.
Can I add one thing there, please?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just because, you know, based on what Tomislav said, because his strong support, so that we have time to investigate into that. I just want to add one thing because I heard like our peers are like using Power BI for the data tree stuff. Another thing I would suggest for other users to look at it, the Assemble's public API, because you own the data for your company in a very well organized structured way. So if you look into the Assemble's API, you could get whatever information you want to query from. So an example of that, because we use SharePoint a lot, some cases we just skipped Power BI. We just query directly from Assemble's public API to set up our own customized dashboard on SharePoint directly. So it really gives you that flexibility to query your own data directly, or you could also like set up your own HTML page by using like Flashcap or other tools. It's basically like all the data in Assemble is basically like a data frame. So you could play around it, like sort by, group by, even though those are not provided in the current interface of Assemble's online version. But you could do all those data analytics on your own side, either by either R or Python. But what is great about it, it's open source for within your company, like you really expose those API endpoints for you.
Wonderful.
Quick in, yeah.
Absolutely. So we got time for like one or two more topics here really quick. So just looking towards the future, obviously we've talked about the here, the now, the past. We often hear about the common data environment. Well, that's that buzzword CDE. I at the same time, I think it's a whole bunch more than just that, a buzzword. It's standardization, it's democratization, it's all the things that we're kind of talking about here. I would love to hear a quick opinion, we'll give it 30-second opinion on what we think that it means for the future of the industry. Like how important to the way things work is a common data environment.
I mean, I would say just having the reduction of data silos, having one source of truth, you're going to increase your accuracy and efficiency as far as communication with your trade partners, with your customers, whoever you're dealing with, if everything is in a common data environment. So, I mean, that in and of itself is just totally worth it.
Yeah, it's in my mind, a lot of it has to do with just like wasted time. Like you have all these different environments for information. Not only do you have to spend time reconciling, you have to spend this time yeah, it might only take you 5 minutes, but 5 minutes over 365 days over 10 years is hours and hours and hours of wasted time. So being considerate of kind of just the common data environment, how it can help drive the industry forward towards BIM mandates, towards democratization, is I think really important. And last but not least here, just we talked about the 5 or 10 years in the past. How do we think things are going to look 5 or 10 years in the future?
First, we all need to take slow down and take a deep breath, because the changes are coming. And yeah, often when we talk about digital transformation, we try to equate what we do with performing an open heart surgery on a running patient, because we in this industry have no time to stop. And the last 2 years have proven that significantly. But I would say whatever we do, it needs to be geared toward creating more sustainable, not only business, but sustainable culture, sustainable environment, sustainable society that will be able to facilitate growth through the proper use of technology. How that technology is going to look 10 years from now, I'll rely on you and the rest of the people at Autodesk to keep us informed and work with us closely. But key is going to be listening and understanding what is it that we need and what is it the society needs in order to get to some panacea of, us having sane lives and delivering better products on time.
Beautifully said. And I could not agree more. And Autodesk, we will definitely be here, still cruising along. So with that, I'd love to move into to some Q&A here in the last couple of minutes before we wrap this up. I will get to the top question. I saw one though specifically was directed at Jordan Trice. I'd love to open one up to Jordan. Jason Sealer asks, you mentioned your conditioning model elements by estimate line items. How do you handle things like assemblies or wall assemblies that have to say framing, gypsum, brick veneer? Is this a single element, but it would impact 2 or more line items? Kind of understanding how you deal with those assembly sort of components.
No, that's a really good question. And so right now we're looking at a single line item, like an all-in type of assembly in our estimating platform, but we're moving down. I have actually meeting in 8 minutes about modeling in-house our self-perform work. So we're going to be trying to tackle assemblies in Revit potentially, or Tekla, or find a way to kick off the assemblies in our estimating platforms. I am definitely a proponent of having that done in the model, because I know that we can extract that data and then assign very specific detailed estimate line items to the Revit data. So that's what I'm going to push for in 8 minutes. But yeah, it's a really good question. We're just trying to ease into this, and I know a lot of companies have integrated software platforms like Beck or M2, where they're mapping across into their estimating database. But we are still committed to Assemble. We're still committed to our current tool set, and we're just trying to push the boundaries a little bit. So I don't know, Badri, if you had anything to add to that.
No, Jordan.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No, of course. Thank you, Jordan. So we got another question. Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to say there's an interesting question. Do you budget the cost of BIM and VDC services into your individual project cost, or is it all part of the overhead cost at your organization? So Tomislav.
Yeah, I think what helped establish VDC as valid part of organization was really becoming a profit center and making sure that cost of VDC services, if you will, is built in the cost of project and being fully disclosed. So that if I were to do this all over again, that's the way I would do it, because it just drives you to prove the value and then really have a narrative that can justify that engagement.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts?
At DPR, I think it's a project cost. I'd be pushing for just a flat fee, but still project-based, not necessarily overhead, so that we can do BIM on every project because we know they all need it. So
At Gray, we do it on a project basis as well. It's not overhead. So
Awesome. So Samir, I saw another good question here from Robert. Contractors are benefiting from architects and engineers sharing models, but very rarely do I see contractors offering to compensate the design teams for that value. It's hard for the design teams to value the BIM since we're not the ones who are benefiting from it at the end. Shouldn't contractors be more upfront and offer compensation for the data that you want? And I will start by saying very briefly on this that I think you have to consider that there is quite a bit of value in the design team using BIM and the way that they design, not having to go update 1,000 sheets. So I do want to call out that, but I do think it's a very good question about like I actually do agree with I never hear that backwards visualization. I think architects sometimes get a bad rap. And I would love to hear the thoughts on that real quick here.
Good point. However, I would also say, let's start thinking about integrated workflows. Let's do the design build and design assist. I mean, obviously I'm beating my own drum here, being Clayco design builder, but that's the recipe for success. Then you can share the benefits of BIM.
Anybody else? Everyone's gonna plead the fifth on this one, huh? Alrighty. Well, let's we have a really quick one here that I think should be a good one. Do any of you guys include BIM and data requirements in contract docs? Bunch of head shakes, everyone, 100% across the board. Good to know. Well, I think, Samira, do you think we get enough time for one more question, or do you think we should start to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think we need to start to wrap this up. We've been answering questions in the chat panel, so I think we're good there.
Awesome.
Short on time.
Well, in that case, I do really appreciate everybody coming to see us chat today. The huge thanks to everybody on this panel. I had a feeling this would go well, and it exceeded my expectations. So I hope it was fun. I hope it was enjoyable. And to everybody who attended, I want to obviously thank all of you again. And I hope you guys found today's session to be beneficial, informative. And as you guys leave, think about and digest what you heard today. I'd love to challenge you to continue the conversation at your firm or your organization, particularly if you're a business leader, and ask yourself and your colleagues, like, what role can BIM play in giving your company a competitive advantage? And I tell you what, at this point, I don't even know if I'd call it a competitive advantage. I'd call it keeping up with the competition. But definitely consider how can BIM help you guys be a successful business, not just a pretty picture. And which ways can you guys digitize and optimize estimating workflows? Like of all processes, that's definitely one that I think could use the most thought. And it's no fault of the estimators. They're the most unsung hero in any job, but we definitely need to start thinking about them and how to make them more efficient and just more sustainable, as Tomislav said. So please check out the class page for additional handouts and important information related to the topics. Lots of awesome content there that really dives deeper into some of the things that we discussed. You can also connect with any of us on LinkedIn through the AU system to further the discussion and to chat further. So I hope everybody enjoys the rest of AU, and thank you again for joining us.